Hi, welcome to what I hope is not a clickbait title video. I do want to talk about thrillers and kind of my problem with them, but I also want to recommend some that I do enjoy. While I mostly read and discuss literary fiction on this channel, I do read across genres, and thrillers are, I guess, the closest thing I have to a guilty pleasure. I don't really like to categorize them as such, but I usually end up rating them kind of low and not fully enjoying them the way that I enjoy most other genres that I read, such as literary fiction, fantasy, sometimes YA, amongst possibly others. I feel that a lot of thrillers are very good at pulling you in through their description, through whatever kind of mystery that they aim to kind of solve, and by the end of them, but they usually leave me a little bit disappointed in a lot of other choices that they make or that the authors make throughout the book. And I don't like talking about this because I know a lot of people really enjoy thrillers. I don't want to come off as like snobby, and I feel some of my criticisms maybe could come off as a little snobby, honestly. And I also feel like maybe they're just not books that are really made for me in a sense. But I also don't know if that's totally an excuse because there are thrillers that I've read and that I've really enjoyed. So when I see a lot of popular ones, such as The Only One Left by Riley Sager, which I'll talk about a little bit more later, get rated so highly, I'm like, did I miss something? Is this really just not a book for me? Because I really feel that there are things in it that how can people just so easily accept the ending, for example, or some of the character choices, for example. But we will get into that. But speaking of characters, I feel that my biggest issue with thrillers is the characters and character choices. And this might be because I do normally read a lot of character-driven novels, and most thrillers are not that. But I just do not like that most characters are not well developed. And fine, I understand, like, this is a plot-driven book, this is a book that relies on suspense and mystery and drama, and so you can't necessarily have all that, as well as characters that are, I don't know, super three-dimensional characters, fully fledged characters. But when the narrator or kind of the main character that you're following feels like a flat, sort of like interestless, hobbyless void that is just flung into a situation with nothing else going for them, I don't like that. And I don't know how that's something that a lot of people are just totally okay with like zero criticisms. I guess people do read for the plot, they do read for like the mystery and what's going to happen later, but I feel like I don't know, it takes away a lot of the enjoyment for me if the character just has nothing going for them. And I feel like the character, the main character in Riley Sager's newest novel is very much like that. It's just all about the job. Yeah, you do learn some like tragic backstory stuff about her, but I don't know, you don't really learn much about her interests or what she has outside of her life, and I think that's the case for a lot of Riley Sager's protagonists. But he's not the only one who writes them like that. I feel like that's just the case across the board in a lot of books that I've read. If a story is like well written enough or interesting enough or the twists are cool enough, I usually do forgive like kind of the poor character choices that are poor in my opinion. And I can look past that. I think The Paris Apartment is a great example. I did enjoy that thriller. I think the story was good. The characters were like interesting, or the suspects rather were presented in an interesting way. And the ending, like I liked how things kind of got wrapped up in that one. But the main character was kind of boring and didn't stand out to me. But again, maybe that's just like the things that I look out for, and other people are just like, it doesn't matter, I'm just here for the mystery. The second thing, and this has just been happening a little bit more that I've been reading, is just very kind of cheap and unrealistic twists. Like I'm willing to suspend my disbelief for a lot of things. I think you kind of have to do that in a lot of thrillers or mysteries. I think that's just kind of the genre for it, but there's some things where it's just like, this is too much, like the way that these characters met or knew each other. I don't want to spoil anything. But again, going back to The Only One Left, like the first kind of like plot twist you really get to, I was like, okay, kind of unrealistic, but I'll accept it for the sake of the story, whatever. And then, I'm not joking, but there's at least 3 more, if not more, twists that kind of come at you regarding the murders that happen in that book and how certain characters like relationships with each other, and it's just too much for me. I was like, I can't accept all that. I can't accept that. It's too convenient. It's too, like, things were just too enmeshed in a way that didn't make sense to me at all. I don't remember it as well, but Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell, I think, if I recall correctly, has a sort of similar problem where things are a little bit too convenient. And then kind of going back to characters, certain character choices just really confused me, which kind of adds into the plot. And yeah, I don't know. I can only suspend my disbelief for so much, it feels like. And I don't think that a good thriller needs like 5 twists to be successful. I think there's a difference between misleading your readers, putting red herrings in your story, and then completely blowing things up. I think you can successfully kind of like lie to your readers in a sense, or make them believe something without just, I don't know, throwing things all about at the end, where it's just like, where did this come from? Really, why is this necessary is maybe more the question. And I think if you have read The Only One Left by Riley Sager, which I keep going back to, but it's just, I don't know, because I just read it, and so it's just a pertinent example to me. If you read it, or if you have read it, and you know all the twists at the end, you might know the one that maybe made me the most mad, where it's like, this wasn't really necessary to me. Like, it didn't feel like it brought things full circle, it didn't feel like it completed things at all to me. It just felt, I don't know, weirdly convenient, but so did a lot of things about that book, honestly. And lastly, I mean, this is kind of 2 things, but I feel they're a bit combined. The writing style just isn't for me, and this is, I recognize, is like very much a personal thing. Some people might enjoy it a little bit more, but I feel like all thrillers kind of like blend together for me, and so then they don't become very memorable. And again, that also might be a personal thing. I do read a lot, perhaps a lot more than the average person, so some of these books do just blend together. It's not just a thriller problem. I don't obviously remember the plot or big things that have happened in every single book. I do reread things sometimes, or I have to like kind of reread my reviews or other people's reviews to be like, oh yeah, this was something that happened. So it's not just thrillers, but I do find that I feel that way about thrillers the most. For this video, like, I went back to see kind of some of the thrillers I've read in the last couple of years to think about some to talk about, either to give recommendations or to just discuss as an example of ones that I don't think were very well done. And there were a lot that I just could not remember at all. The Guest List by Lucy Foley, I could not tell you what happened in that book. I rated it 2 stars, so I don't think I liked it at all, but I could not tell you who killed who, what happened really. Like, I can read the description and it doesn't bring memories back at all, which I feel is unfortunate. Like, I read that book 1 or 2 years ago, it wasn't that long ago. I feel like I should still kind of remember something about it, especially when I look at the cover, read the description, but I, again, could not tell you where that plot went. So yeah, this is just me kind of venting because I just read a thriller and kind of just felt like talking about this for a little while, because I feel this way every time I read a thriller, and I'm usually a little disappointed. And yeah, I just wanted to see, I wonder if anyone feels the same way, especially if you are someone who maybe reads different genres a bit more than thrillers. I feel like if all you read is thrillers, then maybe you don't have this problem at all. Maybe it's just a genre you're very used to, so you're very used to kind of like writing styles, writing choices, character decisions, and that's fine. I should have said this at the beginning, honestly, like, and I don't want to judge anyone for reading thrillers. That is not the purpose of this video at all. I do read thrillers. I do kind of consider them as a guilty pleasure, but just barely. Like, I don't really like using that term for the books I read or for the books that anyone reads. I think we should read the things that make us happy, that we enjoy, and I know thrillers are that for a lot of people. But there are some gripes I have that I just don't think some of these very popular thrillers especially are very good, and there are thrillers out there that personally I think are better that I don't see talked about as much. And so I wanna bring some of those up, and I wanna talk about them a little bit. So here are a couple recommendations, or a few recommendations rather, of some thrillers that I did enjoy and that I think if you haven't read, you should. Some of them are more popular than others. The first is The Birthday Party, and I have a whole video on this one, so I won't talk about it too much. This is a very slow and suspenseful thriller that kind of goes through what happens when strangers interrupt a family's birthday party. This one is honestly dark and frightening. I said in the other video, if this was a movie, I don't think I'd be able to watch it. I really appreciate the character choices that are made here. You do kind of get into a lot of people's backstories, and things just really make sense and line up to me in a way that I find very satisfying. It is slow, but some interesting and important secrets do get revealed throughout, bringing it to quite a satisfying but chilling conclusion. Next book is Malice by Keiko Higashino, and this is about an author who is just about to move to Vancouver from Japan when he is found murdered in his locked office by his wife and his best friend, who both seem to have very strong alibis. Or do they really? As this story goes on, it becomes very clear that we want to discover more the why of the why of him being murdered rather than the how, or the who even. This book made me realize that I'm way too trusting of narrators. It does go in between 2 different narrators if I remember correctly, and yeah, I'm just very too trusting of unreliable narrators, even when it's a little obvious that they might be unreliable. So that really made me reevaluate how I read thrillers. and kind of how I read other books as well, honestly. Sadie by Courtney Summers is another one. This might be one of the more popular ones on this list. I definitely heard about it from BookTube, and I listened to the audiobook, which I highly recommend that as the format of consuming this book, because yeah, there were different narrators, and the way it was being told, because there is a sort of podcast element to it, I think really hearing that as an audiobook really adds to it. In this book, Sadie is a young girl who goes on a road trip and quest really for revenge and to find out what happened to her sister who died a few years back. On this road trip, she meets a lot of different people, she finds different clues, and it all kind of is bringing her towards the truth that the police didn't really care enough about to find out themselves when this actually happened. Meanwhile, there's a radio personality who's passing through or in town who hears about Sadie missing. She also now becomes a missing persons case. You do hear it from her perspective as the story goes, but you also hear it from this random guy's perspective. He starts a podcast and begins to investigate her sister's case, and tries to really track her and follow her to see what happened to her, because again, the police don't really care about this missing girl from this kind of like very poor town, very poor family. I think this had a very satisfying like arc, how you as the reader like found things out, how each of the different characters also made discoveries throughout the book because it is happening from the different perspectives, and just kind of how it all came together. It was also very moving. I wanted to cry for and with Sadie throughout a lot of this book. Again, I think the audiobook version really helped with that, because you do get to read it in her voice, or hear it, sorry, in her voice. But yeah, this one was a very enjoyable one for me. Next book is Confessions by Kanai Minato, and this is a very chilling story about a teacher who tries to seek revenge for towards some students who were responsible for her daughter's death some time ago. If I remember correctly, this also has different narrators, or at least different perspectives with what's happened to her daughter, as well as what is happening in the present. It is a little bit repetitive, but ultimately as the story unfolds, I think it is very dark, very good, very well written. I really liked following the different characters, kind of the motives for what happened, and the teacher's reaction to something very devastating in her life. Despite it being a little repetitive, it was very addictive to kind of find out like what had happened in the past, as well as what will happen next. And the last one is Chasing the Boogeyman by Richard Chizmar. In an interesting choice, the author writes himself into a book as a character who goes back to his hometown just as a bunch of young girls are being killed, and the town goes on lockdown, and he starts to investigate that. The town kind of starts to wonder, like, is this is this killer even entirely human, with how this is happening, like out of sight in this very small town. So while this town is on lockdown, the narrator does begin to investigate and find clues and write about them. And I really appreciate there's like pictures in this about this, like, I believe fictional hometown, and definitely fictional story. It does read a little bit as like, I mean, true crime, and it has true crime vibes even though it's not true crime. It's a little bit of a horror as well, but I think it very much feels like a thriller to me too. I think it was very creatively written. Part of me can't believe I didn't like really predict the ending until it happened, but I think that really does speak to how well it was written. The ending felt like it could have maybe been predictable, but it wasn't, to me at least. But it wasn't outlandish either. It made sense. It all came together really nicely. So yeah, I really appreciate about that. It's a little bit of a more horror vibes thriller, but I definitely recommend it. So thank you for watching. This was, yeah, mostly just meant for me to vent. I'm curious if anyone else does feel the same way about thrillers as I do. And again, this isn't meant to judge. I'm just really curious why certain authors do become like top-selling thriller authors when there's just slight sometimes inconsistencies or weird character or story choices, in my opinion. But I know they are easy and fun reads, and I don't mean to shame anyone for reading them at all. I don't think it's like a lesser book. There's just some like little gripes I have with them that are maybe just completely personal. But I want to make this video to see if anyone feels the same. If there's any thrillers you can recommend to me, that would be great, because they are addictive and I do like reading them still. And I will, maybe, I keep saying like I probably won't read another Riley Sager, but if another one sounds as good as The Only One Left sounded, like I might pick it up. So it do be that way. But thanks again for watching. If you like this video, please give it a like, please subscribe, please share it if you have a book reading friend in your life, whether they like thrillers or not. It would mean a lot. And I will catch you in the next one.